if I can use that phrase, around the country to be available for operational policing roles. So there are administrative tasks that take place around the country, and we intend to provide civilian members to free up that group.
Okay,
well.
So again, have you got a plan then over the course by 2021 of the redeployment of 2,000 Gardaí back into frontline duty in Garda stations throughout the country?
We have a plan for the 500 this year, because that's what's been promised to us for this year. We have a process of developing a workforce plan which will get into the level of detail that you want. That will be available at the end of this year. But our primary focus at the moment was around the allocation that was provided, the sanction was provided us for 2017, and we have a plan for that.
Okay, so but you have a plan every year, year on year for the next number?
There will be a plan for every year, Deputy.
Okay, will you be able to provide us with that in terms of where those numbers, you're saying 500 for this year, where they're being redeployed and what Garda stations they're being deployed to?
So we can provide you with the workforce plan that details some of that, and clearly we can revert as other plans emerge. So I don't have a plan for 2018 today, but we will have a plan. You know, we will have plans for those periods as we go forward.
Okay, but I just want to focus on, in particular, because it is the most important aspect, and why I'm focusing on it is, you know, there's a context of you're before us with a spend of 1.5 billion. 1 billion of that is on wages. It is the human element, the human capital, in terms of where those guards are actually going to be deployed. Deputy Murphy touched on it earlier as well, in terms of the specifically urban areas, or is there focus on rural areas as well?
No, urban and rural areas. And to give you a practical example, Deputy, we have a pilot process in 4 divisions around the country where we're looking at the manner in which those administrative services are being provided, with a view to lifting them up to a divisional level from a district level. So they include in Mayo and in Galway and in Cork, as well as in Dublin. So our focus is countrywide to look at what's the right deployment model for civilian members in administrative roles in the different types of divisional structures we would see.
Okay, I suppose, Commissioner, why I'm really sticking on this is because I want to focus on in terms. There's been a lot of conversation here this morning in terms of ICT, in terms of the divisional headquarters being built. I praise you. I pass Kevin Street every morning. It's quite impressive building, but it's what people do in that building. People listening in here this morning are interested in your style of policing and what that means. Because I go to all of the JPC meetings in my county for over a decade, councillor as a TD, and there is a fear there. And you might think it's only a perceived fear, but it is a real fear. If it wasn't, the roadshow that Paul Williams had in respect to the 2,000 people that went to the meeting in Thurles, the 2,000 people that went to the meeting in Trim in my own home county, would not have gone if there was not a fear in terms of policing and in terms of crime. So I'm asking, in terms of your style of policing, is it one where you actually want to see the deployment of people on the street? Because there is a very, very big perceived fear there in terms of antisocial behaviour and attacks on people in this country.
The fear of crime is very, very real, Deputy, and we recognise that. And earlier I spoke about some of our communication strategy about making sure we get messages out there. But the really important thing is having people on the street.
Okay.
And you asked a question about what is the emphasis on civilianisation and having civilian members. It's to make sure that sworn Gardaí are out engaging with the community, providing that level of reassurance. Also in terms of the additional recruitment of members, as I said in my opening address, 198 new members last week went to stations all over the country. By the end of this year we will have 400 additional new members going to stations. And the reassurance, actually, by having boots on the street, so to speak, and having people out engaging with the community is really palpable and having the effect. And I think that's something that we have to continue. So in terms of our style,
it's not in my county. It's the biggest issue at the moment in my county. You would have seen on the front of the tabloid papers last week on the Joe Duffy show, because of a very, very serious incident. The front of my local paper last week talking about crime in Meath, out of control. Out of control.
okay.
Where a shopkeeper was beaten around the head with a glass vase by thugs, and the Mayor of Navan, Councillor Tommy Riley, 73 years of age, had to jump in to save his son in that incident. Why it is shocking is that a Garda car arrived at the scene, spoke to the thugs, and then drove off. It sparked a national debate on the front of all the national papers in this country, on the Joe Duffy show, and it is a sad state of affairs in this Houses of the Oireachtas and the Garda Síochána that it takes the Joe Duffy show, apparently, to solve issues. So I'm asking you to say there's real palpable sense of people feeling confident. Not in my county, not in my town. A 73-year-old man, Mayor of Navan, had to jump in to save his son. They're not there. It's not boots on the ground. We're not seeing it. The context of me asking the question is, you're before us with a spend of 1.5 billion, 1 billion on wages. I'm asking, is there a plan to actually see people, the people listening in really want to hear, are the guards actually on the ground doing their job?
Well, Deputy, if I give you an example, and my sympathies go to the individuals that you're talking about, and obviously it's a matter that we are looking at. But this year, since recruitment commenced, so 36 new members of An Garda Síochána have gone to Meath Division. And that does not take account of the consequential transfers. As you know, there are always people looking to
retirements.
Division. Retirements as well, and that factors in the retirements. I'm not saying that and that's why we absolutely welcome the government's commitment to increasing the overall strength of the Garda members of the organisation to 15,000. Allowing for 300 retirements on average per year, that takes us time. And that's why we very much welcome, by the end of this year, we will have 800 new members of An Garda Síochána, and we welcome the commitment to making sure that is there. We can't distribute everybody at the same time. We do have a plan, a distribution model, where we try to be, in terms of retirements, factoring in, I know it has become an issue in Deputy Murphy's constituents as well, but factoring in retirements, factoring in crime demands, factoring in all of those population
But there's a little point in you quoting me the statistics and you telling me you're confident in terms of people on the street if it's not the reality on the ground, and that proves it's not the reality on the ground. There is little point on the Garda Síochána on my local radio station every week, and I acknowledge that every week they're on it detailing the crime. If they're only telling the people about the crime that's happened and there's no follow-up. So what I'm asking is, in terms of, have you got a plan where you actually instruct your chief supers in terms of actually how many people, and getting back to that basic element of policing? I'm asking you about your style of policing. Is your style of policing, and I acknowledge policing has changed and the very intricate work that you have to do in terms of drugs and all of that, but people are afraid that the very basic element of policing, of people actually staving off these thugs that now seem to control towns like Navan or Mullingar or Thurles, because they're allowed to wander the streets and not be challenged by the force that is supposed to be protecting us. Why is it that a mother walks down the streets of my hometown in Navan and actually is afraid because these guys seem to think that they own the streets, that these thugs can go up and beat a guy around the head with a glass vase, that guards arrive, have a chat with them and drive off, and it took the Joe Duffy show to actually implement the arrest? That's crazy.
Well, Deputy, as I say, it's a matter that we are taking up with local management. But can I just say, you asked about the style of policing. So yes, there is, as you know, there is an Assistant Commissioner in charge of the Eastern Region, there's a Chief Superintendent in charge of Meath Division, and there's a local superintendent in the various districts in the Meath Division as well, including in Trim. And yes, they are responsible for delivering local, responsive policing. When issues such as you have identified arise, they are the people with responsibility and accountability for ensuring that the measures that are in place. Our responsibility is to make sure that we equip them. On top of that,
but you want to know that the style of policing that they're implementing for your force is one that gives confidence to the people, that they have the confidence that they can walk down the street, and that they're not stuck in the Garda station in Navan or Mullingar and Thurles or the new one in Kevin Street. That's the point I'm asking you.
Yes, Deputy. And in terms of measuring that confidence, we have our public attitude survey. That is rolling on a quarterly basis.
Out of control. There's his face. That's the public attitude. Out of control. He was bare around the head.
Deputy, it's a horrific crime. And there is no doubt about it. As I say, my sympathies go to the individuals involved and the family of those individuals. What we are doing is we are providing a policing service.
I appreciate that, but the journalists are capturing the public attitude. You talked to Deputy Kelly about this, and Deputy McSharry about the money you're spending on PR and making sure that the guards are not insular. But the journalists in these counties are capturing, Paul Williams is capturing the public attitude on his roadshow. And I'm just saying, are you gathering that and actually telling the style of policing that has swayed that and actually gets these guys that they don't feel they control our streets?
Absolutely.
With a spend of 1 billion on wages?
Absolutely. And part of that is the deployment of new resources. But more importantly, part of that is also a number of the initiatives that we have in place, particularly around public safety initiatives, Operation Thor, and we can provide to the committee, if you wish, Chair, the successes of Operation Thor since it was implemented,
On
and
Operation
the high
Thor.
visibility that it provides to make sure that we do provide that reassurance to the community. One crime is a crime too many, but unfortunately, as I say, we live in a society where crime is a reality, as it is in all societies. However, what we do is strive to reduce it as much as we possibly can.
On Operation Thor, and in terms of the traffic or the transport element or whatever, are you actually trying to increase and duplicate the mobile force? Because again, in my area, the traffic corps was taken from Northmead and just redeployed in Southmead, which means that one part of the county is left without an available traffic corps. So nationwide, I don't want you to have to focus on Meath, but nationwide, are you actually trying to increase the services or just actually strip an already stretched service?
One of the measures in our public attitude survey is visibility, and Assistant Commissioner Finn has been tasked by me with revamping not just the traffic corps but roads policing in its entirety to provide exactly the type of service that you have described. So not alone the visibility but the level of engagement. Michael, do you want to talk about that?
We're well over the time. We're over the start.
I'm aware of the reconsolidation of the traffic corps in Meath because they were scattered all over the place, and we brought them back for the moment into the one centre where we are building. We're putting extra people into traffic in there, but we need a level of supervision, and having them scattered over the place probably wasn't the most effective way. So I'm aware from talking to the Chief Superintendent of Meath that he has consolidated traffic corps to one location, but we're putting more supervision in there and more people in there, so he will have a bigger traffic corps by the end of the year.
That's fine. The only concluding mark I have is in terms of the public attitude and the focus on public attitude or whatever, I would ask you to take away today that the people, the journalists in my county are capturing the public attitude. And if you've got a headline out of control, that's the public attitude I would ask you to take away and ensure that the style of policing is one that actually gets these thugs, that they're afraid to come down the street, not the genuine people.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Now, at this stage, we're concluding this session at 12:30 because the core services are sitting out and the voting will go until we have a slot until the voting time. That's what the committee agreed because we have afternoon business to do with drafting the Templemore report, and so that means we have 5-minute slots. That's all. And what I will say is, if people don't put the questions, and the answer will have to come. I can extend this until 6 o'clock this evening, but we'll be here until midnight if we do the other.
Chair, I'd like to make a comment on
that. 5 minutes.
The rules weren't complied with, and we're given out about a group before us that doesn't comply with the rules. We agreed an arrangement. They weren't complied with. Maybe it's something we might come back to in private. The reason we're here at 12:15, we agreed to stop at 12. We agreed to stick rigidly. That didn't happen. So I'd just like to say that.
Okay.
It didn't actually happen, and I don't know how they could
I've been very close. One section went, I have a time limit. Most people maybe went 12 minutes instead of the 10. One session went to the 20 minutes instead of a 10. That was because of Jobstown. And because the event happened in 2015 and it referred to the deployment of your resources and staffing and was directly related to the vote here today, I let it on. Other people might question why we had a debate in Jobstown, but it was a 15 event and we're here looking at your resources for 15. That's why I allowed that. So we're into 5. Catherine Connolly, David
clarify how we could have 15 minutes each if it's quite.
No, 5 minutes.
Sorry, 5. Sorry, beg your pardon. But how can? Sorry. That's 5, 10, 15.
No, well, only 3 have indicated so far. Only
25.
What?
Just to clear.
Four have indicated.
That's 20 minutes. Just,
right. So we're over in 20 minutes.
Precise, so
okay. Well, I have 3 in front of me and Deputy. Yeah. I have 4. Yeah. You have 5 minutes starting now.
Thank you for the clarification in relation to the procurement. And if we go back to it now, Mr. Cullen and Commissioner, in as much as I can make sense of it, and Deputy MacDonald has referred to it already, I can't see why there's no procurement. Actually, I'd prefer if, say, in Galway, the local suppliers could be favoured. But obviously they have to comply with procurement. But what you seem to be doing inadvertently or otherwise, some suppliers are getting it because of non-compliance with procurement rules. Isn't that right? I see the supply of vegetables here and so on. Peter's fruit and veg catering, tender in progress. What page is that on? It's on page 2 of what you gave us. But it's on page 2 of the list. Again, I'm not seeking to identify one group. What I'm talking about is... My 5 minutes will be gone as you check things. But.
Well, in terms of, obviously, there is a procurement plan in place, to address all of these issues. So, there may be one particular item.
Oh, no, there's 17 in total. 73 in total, and then if we break down. But can I just, rather than you just...
Deputy, I think for the generality of the question, if I can deal with that way, you've asked, will this be reduced? I think we are saying...
No. I've gone beyond that now, and I've got a list, and when I look at the list, and I'm inexperienced in this area, but there are procurement rules. Your non-compliance is up approximately at 10%, and you gave us reasons: security, urgency sometimes. There's no evidence of that for a lot of these. Now, while I'll accept that sometimes you have to do it, why would you have to do with that in relation to the supply of fruit and veg, the supply of...
Deputy, I suspect that's not actually supply of fruit and veg. In terms of a local catering issue, in terms of if there was an event, for example, Prince Charles was visited in 2015, so there would be catering requirement to support that activity. So that could be the source of that particular item.
All right. Okay, let me just... Look, you've given it to me. 73 non-compliance is unacceptable. We've been there. I would expect that to come down to a small amount under emergency conditions.
What is our objective to reduce that as low as possible?
I know you've said that. Just in relation to Commissioner, something I'm particularly interested in, the victim services offices. And we have a victims directive, and we're about to pass legislation, there's a bill in progress. And you mentioned providing specific offices. Can you just update me on that?
Yes,
throughout the country.
So we've set up in every division, so we've 28 divisions throughout the country. In every division we've set up a victim service office, which is staffed by, and it speaks to Deputy Castle's question about the roles of civilians, it's staffed by both a Garda and a civilian member who are trained. We've had a lot of input from victims advocacy groups and victim support services in terms of the training, and we very much welcome that. We also have set up a National Protective Services Bureau, and we are in the process of rolling out the implementation of regional protective services bureaus, divisional protective services bureaus to support more vulnerable victims. And what that means is that a victim can come into a Garda station, to the victim service office, not just there, but it also provides a link. So one of the feedbacks that we got from victims over the years was that because of the roster system that the Guards are employed on, a victim may not always be able to get the update on their case, or they may not always be able to get in touch with the local Guard. So the victim service office have all of the details, and particularly in light of the victim's directive and the rights of the victim to be kept updated, the victim service office provides that constant link.
So, will you be complying with all your obligations when we pass the legislation in relation to the actual enforcement or the implementation of the directive?
Yes, Deputy, we will. The Victims Service Offices and the National Protective Services Bureau were set up to future-proof the implementation of the Victims Directive and also the Istanbul Convention on Domestic Violence.
Because they're huge. You would accept that the victim many times gets lost.
Absolutely.
In the process, and the whole idea of the Istanbul and the whole lot is to make sure that the victim is not lost and have rights.
Yes, and Deputy, you will see in our modernisation renewal programme part of the cultural shift, and a very important part of our culture shift was putting the victim at the heart of the Garda service, and that's why we prioritise the Victim Service Office and National Protective Services Bureau.
What are the non-public duties? It was referred to already, and I just wanted to. What are the payment for non-public duties?
In terms of providing security at concerts, sporting events, and any other type of event where a sponsor requires a policing service.
Okay, and you get the money back for the cost of providing.
Correct.
That.
Yes.
Okay, there's no profit in question.
No, it's designed around, say, cost recovery.
Okay, and if I still have a few seconds, I'm not sure, so just tell me. I wanted to.
And few seconds, literally seconds.
Well, it's okay. I'll leave.
Okay, next speak, Deputy Cullen.
Can I put just a couple of questions to Mr. Finn? And thank you for your answers earlier. You were most cooperative with the answers that you gave. And I just want to come back to the mandatory alcohol testing issue. Who has responsibility for the management of that initiative? And when did you come into the role?
December December last year.
And when you came into the role and you were obviously then made aware, or you would have been aware of the issues anyway, what was your thought in relation to what you saw?
I was aware that there was a review going on in relation to the breath tests. It hadn't been concluded, and I was aware there was difficulties trying to reconcile the figures. So, as you might recall from our press video, I went to the Medical Bureau Road Safety and I got their data. So that was, I suppose, the revelation that we had a serious gap between what we were saying we had in Pulse versus being what was on the Medical Bureau.
And it was a very serious gap of almost $1 million. So, in terms of your current role now as a manager, and obviously you can't be held culpable for previous failures, but surely you would have been very alarmed at what you saw.
Yes, and I think probably one of my difficulties at the time was I had the information, but I wasn't able to explain what was going on, or I hadn't gone into the in-depth analysis, which my colleague is doing at the moment, to say, well, what was going on? Was this IT problem? Was it a recording issue? And there, all the stuff that...
Have you spoken to your predecessors?
I have, yes.
And what was their response?
In terms of
how this happened, what was going on, because I know there's 2 interim reports. We're waiting for a complete report, but surely you would have been trying to satisfy yourself that they had some knowledge or some understanding of what was happening.
Well, I suppose my initial response was to, can we sort this out and can we reconcile our figures and make sure that the process we have in place is robust and it stands up, and that we can say that the figures that we are breath testing are correct, because it may very well be that that 1 million is incorrect, that the discrepancy isn't as significant as we thought at the time, but that information that we revealed to the public at the press conference said, look, we've discovered this, we have a big hole here, we don't know why there's a big hole here, but we're not happy with it and we're taking our figures down off the website.
The reason why I'm asking these questions, Mr. Finn, is because I've read the 2 interim reports cover to cover several times, and they understate, in my view, the case in some instances, but they reference errors and inconsistencies and so on, and they look at systems failures and data gathering and all of that. There's very little reference to management failure, oversight. Somebody's responsible for making sure that something as serious as a mandatory alcohol testing initiative is done right. Somebody has to be held accountable for that. Yeah. You will be aware as well, and the Commissioner will be aware, that if it is the case that the inconsistencies are as great as is reported, that has had huge implications in policy terms, because, as you know, policy is set based on data that's given to the government, to the department. So if the data is massively incorrect, it's very, very serious in terms of policy responses. So I'm trying to understand why there's very little attention given in any of the interim audit reports that I've read, interim reports that I've read, in terms of management culpability, examination of management, your predecessors.
Well, and including myself.
Yes,
I'm
including
here now. I'm at the helm now.
Specifically your predecessors.
And it's my responsibility now, and I have to make sure that we call in our regional traffic superintendents and we look at the figures and we examine them, we give them. I now have 2 analysts working for me full-time in the Traffic Bureau who can give us the type of information that we need going forward. So managers out there on the ground. Is it
possible there was management failures?
I think, well, it might be unfair to Michael O'Sullivan for me to judge, but I've no doubt it was a serious...
Is it possible, Commissioner, is it possible there was management failures?
Well, Chair, I think we have to wait until the conclusion of Michael O'Sullivan's report.
I understand, I'm just saying, is it possible?
But you asked a question, Deputy, in relation to governance, yes. And yes, there are management responsibilities here. Yeah. And what we did was, when this matter came to light, we brought together all of the Assistant Commissioners, all of the Chief Superintendents, and indeed all of the superintendents from all over the country, to emphasise and re-emphasise to them their responsibility and their accountability in relation to these matters. And that's been made very clear.
You see what I see, Commissioner, when I read the 2 interim reports? I see a pattern that we had with the Garda Training College as well, where there's an awful lot of emphasis on managing the problem, which has to be done, because Mr. Finn is right, if there's a problem, it has to be corrected. I don't see the same level of urgency or the same level of attention being given to management failures, people being held to account for what happened. It just doesn't scream from the pages at all from what I've seen, and that concerns me. So what level of scrutiny, what level of examination, of investigation is there ongoing in relation to potential management failures here? Because things don't happen by accident at times. It may well be an accident, but I would surmise in this case it possibly is not. So if it wasn't an accident, somebody is responsible for the system failure, and people have to be held to account. I'm asking, is that part of that ongoing work?
Yes, Chair, it is, and Deputy. And if I could say one thing that we very much welcome is the fact that the Policing Authority have commissioned a completely independent body to complete the review and to complete the work that Michael O'Sullivan has commenced. And we very much welcome that, and it will be, I am absolutely sure and confident, an absolute complete review, and whatever the findings of that will be fully implemented by An Garda Síochána.
Deputy Kelly.
I spoke earlier on about consultancy and Accenture. The recent Chief of Police conference held in Dublin, did any major supplier to the Gardaí sponsor that conference?
The Chiefs of Police Conference was hosted by An Garda Síochána, but was actually held by the International Association of Chiefs of Police. And yes, we would have to check, but Accenture will be partners of the International Association of Chiefs of Police.
So they sponsored it?
No, I can't say that they sponsored it, Deputy. We'd have to check with the association.
Will you come back and to get to the value of what they contributed?
Yes.
And the breakdown of that. Next question. When it comes to the telephone liaison unit, how much funding goes into it? What does it do? And very briefly, please. And how many staff has it? And has that changed in recent times?
Sorry, Chair, if I may just clarify my previous answer, my colleagues telling me, actually the International Association of Chiefs of Police, if they had any dealings with Accenture, it was independent of us and not to do. So we would have to, obviously they're a third party, and we would have to see if there are any issues there.
Surely they would have, given it was on in Ireland, they would have worked through you or worked with you.
Well,
anyway,
we were
you
just
can come back to us.
hosting the conference, so yeah, I don't want to give a commitment on behalf of another agency.
Fine, try your best.
Yes. And they don't belong in this jurisdiction either, so just to be mindful of that.
I said try your best.
Sorry, Deputy, the telephone liaison unit I take it you're speaking about, they're part of the Security and Intelligence branch of An Garda Síochána.
I know many people are in the unit. Has the volume of people in the unit changed in recent times? What's the budget for the unit?
Well,
because there's an overspend here, and I just want to get to the bottom of.
In terms of the TLU, Deputy, can we just... sorry, Deputy, could you just refer us to the page where the overspend is? Because
there's an overspend of 1.2 million in communications in total, and I understand most of it is nothing to do with this, but I want to know, I just basically want to know, has there been any changes in relation to how this unit has operated in the last number of years? Has there been changes in the volume of staff? And could you, by not here, but through your conduit, Mr. Nugent, could you give us a breakdown of, I don't want names, but I just want the structure of the unit and how it operates?
Chair, maybe I could take a direction on that. I'm not sure. I think, if I understand correctly, the underspend or the overspend relates to communications. The telephone liaison unit is completely separate if we're talking about the same thing.
Okay, fine. We didn't know that. Go on then.
Yes. Telephone liaison unit is part of the security and intelligence infrastructure. It's overseen by a judge of the High Court who reports annually to the Oireachtas.
So it's not part of your spend at all?
Oh no, it is part of our spend, Chair, but it's governed under national security.
My three questions, which you can come back to me on, I have no problem if you want to do it. One, has the spend on it changed? Two, can we get a structure of the unit, and has that unit changed in the last number of years? And three, and it's very important, and have any of the protocols in relation to how that unit operates changed in the last number of years? In relation to the...
So, sure, if I could... If I could just say that, so the governance around the national security infrastructure is overseen particularly in relation to what the TLU comprises of. I don't believe there's anything specific in the vote in relation to TLU because it's not separately ring-fenced in the vote. It's part of our national security infrastructure, and it is overseen by a judge of the High Court who reports annually to the Oireachtas.
I understand that. I just want to know the structure of it. Has the structure of it changed? The volume of people in it? And, in whatever best way you can, the volume of spend on it?
We don't designate the spend around it because they are employees of An Garda Síochána. We can do a head count, possibly.
Yeah, head count and structure, and have processes changed. In relation to the Charter and Liaison Committee, I'm not going anywhere near Charter and Chair just before you. The Charter and Liaison Committee was set up. Can you, who was in this and who was hired? When were they hired? and why were they hired, and what is the purpose of it?
We have, so as with all tribunals of inquiry, and obviously I'm conscious that the Disclosures Tribunal is currently sitting chair,
So am I.
but as with all tribunals, there is an office appointed to liaise with the tribunal. Mr Charlton, in his establishment, set out an ambitious timeframe in order to comply and to be able to be in a position to support and fully support the tribunal on behalf of An Garda Síochána, which we are continuing to do. There were, we had two.
There are two people.
So can you tell me, just to save time, Chair, can you supply a structure of who's there, right? What contracts they're under and what date their contracts are from? This is very specific now, what dates their contracts were from and what dates they were signed off by the department and by DPER.
You got the question,
Right?
so you reply.
Because I mean, and also just for information, I presume that liaison committee is there for anybody in the An Garda Síochána who is
As the name suggests, it's for
Fine.
liaison directly to the organisation
and just for clarification, the people who were hired in this, firstly, was there a legal person hired?
No.
Okay, so there's no solicitor hired as part of this?
There's no solicitor hired. We did not hire.
No legal person hired to be part of this unit?
We did not hire a legal.
Okay,
so we
person.
would use the
Fine, I just
assistance
want to know.
of the.
But
Just to be clear, now, as I think it is important, there is a solicitor that's involved, provided by the Chief State Solicitor's Office, but they're not.
But you haven't got any separate legal...
We haven't engaged.
So the people who were actually hired as part of this unit, I presume that was open to public competition?
It was discussed with the Department of Justice at the time.
I know, but I'm asking a specific question. Was this open to public competition?
There are specific skills identified as been required.
Yeah.
Give us a note on the procurement
Yes.
process.
No, I need to, was this open to public competition?
No.
Why not?
It was time bound and it was
How were these
specific
people chosen?
and specific skills that were required. We can send a note to the chair in the interest of time.
No, I don't want to note on this. I want to know here now how those people were chosen.
Based on their knowledge and their understanding of the processes and their previous engagement with similar processes.
Who interviewed them?
Chair, we can provide you with the note on it.
Sorry, Chair. Chair. I want an answer here and now. Who interviewed the people who were in the Charlton Liaison Committee for their jobs that was not under public procurement?
We can provide a note, Chair, if that's suitable on the process and on the costs.
If you have information, if it's available to you now, or you know, you should answer it now.
There's two answers here. Either you don't know, which will be absolutely extraordinary, or else you're not willing to provide the information.
Chair, we can provide the information. I'm not sure if anybody interviewed these people. I'm not aware, so we would have to inquire.
Can I just, and this is very important, Chair. We have a group here that was set up for all Gardaí who were involved in Charlton. We're not talking about Charlton, because this is a cost to the state ultimately. We have a group that was set up. People were put into this unit. There was no public procurement of them. And we're saying here now we don't even know if they were interviewed for the jobs. But you said earlier on that they had to have the appropriate skills. So how could they have the appropriate skills if they weren't interviewed? And surely if they were interviewed, you'd know who interviewed them.
What we can do, Chair, my colleague Ms Nugent is telling me we don't believe that they were interviewed. We can provide the names of the individuals, obviously, and we can provide their skill set. We can also, and I suppose to point out as well, that it was purely, and you asked a question, Deputy, that I would like to answer. The purpose of the Tribunal Coordination Office is to fully assist the Disclosures Tribunal to meet the timeline set out by Mr Justice Charlton and to be in a position to facilitate the coordination from right across the organisation, sorry Deputy if I may, from right across the organisation and to provide an interface and a conduit with the tribunals. And the fact is, and let me be honest here to the committee, the fact is that we've been previously criticised about delays in facilitating and supporting commissions of investigation, etc. And in the time frame set out by the Disclosures Tribunal, it was far more cost effective to hire retired individuals than it would be for extraction costs.
I accept that, but I just want to clarify the information I want. Firstly, I want to know who these individuals are. I want to know why it wasn't done for public procurement. The process by which they were chosen, if they were interviewed and who interviewed them, the costs and the costs associated with it.
Oh, no,
and I want the decision making by DPER and Justice as regards it, and the dates and times, please.
Okay, fine, and you've got that now. And next, final speaker is Catherine Murphy, 5 minutes.
You've said about the step-aside station and the report and Deputy MacDonald asked you to provide us with even the interim report up to now. What I want to know is, I mean, you talk about the CSO and making a decision in relation to where stations will be open, deployment of staff and all the rest of it. Now, I did a look at the census from 96 to 2016 to look at where the big changes occurred. Dublin City grew by 13%, Dunleary by 13%, South Dublin by 22%. Now, 22%, Fingal by 43%, Meath by 44% and Kildare by 39%. So Kildare, Meath, Fingal, that area is the area that has had the huge growth, okay? There hasn't been a parallel increase, and per capita, and I know that's not the only measurement because you look at crime statistics and a whole lot of other things, but on the per capita basis, the lowest ratio of guards to population is Kildare, followed by Meath, and places like Wexford and things like that happen. If there's going to be a deployment of and transfers, are they going to be on the basis of matching the population growth and the crime statistics, or what metrics are you going to use in relation to that? Because it has never been that has played a whole part in this up to now, because I have for the last 10 or 12 years engaged with various assistant commissioners in relation to the deployment of resources, because they've never matched the population growth, and it's part of the reason why I think Deputy Cassells is so frustrated, because the same pattern occurs in areas where there's a very high growth. And for example, I would have thought the Selbridge Garda station its reopening would have, the full opening of it opens part-time, would have come in ahead of, for example, Step Aside, given the population increase.
We can share, I think, and it'd probably be useful, we can share with the committee the distribution of Garda trainees over the last 3 years. I think with the committee, more than happy to do that. What you will see from that is the largest deployment of trainees has been into the types of areas that you talked about.
From a low base, yeah.
Oh no, I accept that. No, my point is though, this is part of a process where we're not in a position to take all 15,000 Gardaís in overnight. So we are wrapping up, but the figures will show that the largest distribution of new trainees have been in the sorts of areas that you described, including Louth. I think is another that's in place as well. So that is the case. But I'll happily share that with the committee so you can see where people have been. Now that's only just the new trainees.
The retirements then are a counterbalance to that, so you need to know what.
No, I understand that.
Yeah. Okay. And just the last question. The report, we had anticipated that we would have that report. We were told it would be the end of June, the one in relation to the breath testing and that, and then it was pushed forward to July. And on the bottom of the interim report we got, it said, as stated, I anticipate having my report completed 31st of July, assuming work can continue without interruption, which is a matter outside my control and that of my team, all of whom have to carry heavy caseloads. I mean, is there sufficient time going to be available for the people involved in this to actually complete it within that time?
Yes, Deputy, there is. I'm assured by the Assistant Commissioner who is completing it that he will. Some of the delays were, as I had mentioned, in terms of the archaic systems and the manual systems that need to be searched. I am assured by the Assistant Commissioner that he'll be in a position to provide his final report by by the end of July. Also, as I've said, Monday just gone, myself and the Assistant Commissioner met with the company that have been procured by the Policing Authority, and we have assured them of full assistance, and we're appointing liaison officers to assist them with their work. So the work will continue at a pace.
Okay. At this stage, we've concluded our questions, and on behalf of the Public Accounts Committee, I want to thank our witnesses from An Garda Síochána for participating in the meeting and for the material supplied to the committee. And I want to get agreement that we dispose of vote 20 subject to the material we've requested to be sent to us in written format. That agreed? Agreed. And we'll suspend for a moment until the court service witnesses take their seat. Thank you. And we're continuing our work programme, and we're dealing with the vote 22 of the court service. We're examining the 2015 appropriation accounts for the court service, and we're joined by Brendan Ryan, CEO, John Kyle, Tom Ward, Sean Quigley, Paul Burns and Geraldine Hurley. Also Mary Tynan and Tom Ward from the Courts of Justice. We're also joined by Joe Burke from the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, and Joyce Doyle from the Department of Justice. Can I remind members, witnesses and those in the public gallery that all mobile phones are to be switched off completely, and that means airplane mode, because just putting it on silent won't be adequate, because it will interfere with the recording system. So I want to remind witnesses that by virtue of Section 17(2)(1) of the Defamation Act, witnesses are protected by absolute privilege in respect of their evidence to the committee. If you are directed by the committee to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter and you continue to do so, you are entitled thereafter only to qualified privilege in respect to your evidence. You are directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and you are asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect that, where possible, you should not criticise nor make charges against any persons or entity by name or in such a way as to make him, her or it identifiable. Members of the committee are reminded of Standing Orders 186, that the committee shall refrain from inquiring into the merits of a policy or policies of the government or a minister of the government, or the merits of the objectives of such policies. Finally, members are also reminded of the long-standing ruling to the effect that members should not comment on or criticise or make charges against a person outside the House or an official by name in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. So, just time-wise, I expect we will go at approximately 2 o'clock until the division bells complete. So, you might be pleased or otherwise with the short time we have available. We have just a busy schedule today, and we want to try and deal with this issue before the summer recess. No, we have other work in the afternoon. So I'll ask the Controller and Auditor General to make a brief opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman. The 2015 appropriation account for Vote 22 Court Service recorded gross expenditure of just over €107 million, and that was an increase of 1.6% compared to 2014. I've provided a chart which gives a high-level breakdown of the expenditure. As indicated in the chart, expenditure and pay was around €49 million. At year-end 2015, a total of 948 full-time equivalent staff were employed in the court service. Members should note that this pay figure does not include the salaries or pensions of judges. Those are paid directly from the central fund of the Exchequer and are estimated at around €32 million for 2015. The court service incurred expenditure of €20 million in 2015 in costs associated with the Criminal Courts of Justice building, which came into use in 2009 under a 25-year public-private partnership arrangement. The annual outlay includes elements of both acquisition costs and premises running costs, which over the life of the PPP are projected to be of the order of around €600 million. The service has also been engaged for a number of years in progressing other PPP projects for the construction or refurbishment of courthouses. Costs of €1.9 million in 2015 associated with developing those projects are included in the spending of €4.6 million incurred on courthouse capital works. Appropriations in aid of the vote expenditure totalled €48 million, of which €44 million was court fees revenue. In addition, court-imposed fines totalling €11 million were received and paid over to the Exchequer, and around €6.6 million in fines and excise fees was collected by the court service and paid over to the revenue commissioners. At the end of 2015, an unspent amount of €1.14 million was liable for surrender from Vote 22 back to the Exchequer. Thank you, Chairman.
Now I call on Mr. Ryan to make an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman, Deputies. I thank the Chairman for the invitation to appear before the committee in my capacity as Accounting Officer for Court Service, Vote 22, and I look forward to discussing any aspect of the vote with you and the members of the committee. I am pleased to report that a clean audit report has been provided by the Controller and Auditor General on the 2015 appropriation account. Overall, the vote was managed successfully and within budget at year-end. As the Controller said, a surrender balance of €1.135706 million was recorded on the vote. The Court Service is responsible for the management and administration of the courts. As you are aware, the administration of justice is a matter for the judiciary, and in accordance with the constitutional independence of the judiciary and the provisions of the Court Service Act, is outside the scope of the functions of the Court Service. You would appreciate, therefore, in my discussions with you today, I am precluded from commenting on any matter relating to the exercise by a judge of his or her judicial functions, or any matter relating to the exercise of quasi-judicial functions by an officer of the court. I am also, of course, precluded from commenting on matters of government policy. Since establishment, the Court Service has worked to ensure that the courts operate effectively and efficiently, and that the use of its available resources is optimised, that value for money is achieved, and that the best possible services are provided to court users. Since the vote was last considered by the Committee in 2014, the Court Service, in common with other government departments and agencies, has seen a very welcome easing in the severe reduction in funding and staffing numbers of previous years. Using the resources available to us, the Court Service continues to work with the judiciary to introduce a broad range of changes and reforms which yield significant savings to the Exchequer, while maintaining access to justice and services for the public. The Service has diligently cut expenditure and has robust financial measures in place across the organisation to ensure that expenditure is kept to the absolute minimum, is incurred only where it is absolutely necessary and unavoidable, and that value for money is achieved. We have also, through proactive management, increased court fees, thus reducing significantly the cost to the Exchequer of running the courts. The Court Service was established to support the courts in the administration of justice. This is a unique role supporting the third branch of government. An effective court system is critical to a functioning modern society. As our society continues to evolve, it places many demands on our institutions, including the courts, and we operate in an increasingly complex environment that has seen considerable change and diversity in the economic, social, demographic and cultural landscape. There are increasing levels of litigation, increasing complexity in legislation, greater court user expectations and ongoing technical advances which pose both challenges and opportunities. To ensure that it continues to fulfil its remit, the Court Service must continue to adapt and evolve, responding proactively to promote access to justice and provide the necessary support for the judiciary and the administration of justice generally. The Court Service has had a modernising agenda since its establishment in 1999. In recent years, we have been successful in introducing a range of transformational changes which has delivered very significant savings and benefits to court users. The programme of structural, organisational and procedural reform, which continued during the economic downturn, introduced a range of efficiency and productivity measures across all aspects of the Court Service. This programme of reform ensured that despite all the severe reductions in staff numbers and funding, the Court Service was able to continue to support the courts in a challenging operating environment, which included year-on-year increases in court sittings, increased judicial numbers, and a programme of legislative reform, much of which impacted directly on the work of the courts. Very significant performance and efficiency improvements have been achieved over the past 5 years as a result of a wide range of change projects implemented. Increased productivity is highlighted by a 25% increase in the ratio of court sittings to staff and a 20% increase in the ratio of judges to staff, which has been achieved during this period. The measures implemented include reform of the court's regional and office structures, with introduction of cross-jurisdictional combined court offices and the closure of smaller offices. This initiative has reduced the number of provincial officers from 65 to 32. This was the most radical reform in the court's administrative structures since the foundation of the state. It introduced an effective single management structure for court offices, maximised the resources available and released county registrars from management functions to enable them to use their professional legal skills to focus on quasi-judicial work to the benefit of the administration of justice. A review of the combined office project is now being carried out to review and assess the benefits realised and identify opportunities for further efficiencies and reform. A programme of rationalisation of court venues was also undertaken, and overall the number of venues outside Dublin is now down to 85 from 267. This has concentrated business in fewer venues of a standard more suitable for the administration of justice. These measures have successfully maximised the use of resources and freed up both judicial and staff time to support the hearing of cases. We have also worked to introduce a substantial programme of legislative and process reform. An ongoing reform to streamline court procedures is underway. We have also, in collaboration with the Court's Rules Committees, sought to address key obstacles to access to justice, including delays, cost and complexity of proceedings, while at the same time promoting and facilitating recourse to alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, ADR. For example, the facilitation of mediation initiatives in the area of family law in Dublin and at a number of venues around the country offers very effective alternatives to court-determined outcomes, resulting in real and significant ongoing benefits for the parties involved. It also provides savings in both judicial and staff time. We work on an ongoing basis with the Department of Justice and Equality in proposing areas of legislative reform and supporting the implementation of the legislative reform programme. This focus on procedural and legislative reform has resulted in improved operations of courts and efficiencies in use not only of court services resources but also and importantly of other justice agencies. There has been increased staff flexibility in the number of areas such as logging of digital audio recordings by court registrars, increased in-house ICT and legal support, all of which have yielded significant savings. The Court Service has made considerable progress in relation to the information and statistics provided on the operation of the courts. They are published in the annual report and available on the Court Service website. Recognising one of the pillars of the Public Service Reform Programme, dealing with greater openness and transparency, the Court Service continues to progress, improve reporting on a range of matters linked to the operation of the courts and intends, through the development of integrated case management systems as soon as resources allow, to continue to extend the range of data which can be provided. The Court Service recognises that technology is a key enabler in delivering improved services to court users and achieving improved efficiencies. Significant benefits have already been achieved through ICT projects already in place for a range of stakeholders, including savings for the Exchequer and better service to court users. The implementation of our ICT programme has resulted in the optimisation of courtroom and court support technology, including the rollout of digital audio recording to all court jurisdictions and venues. The extended use of video link and video conferencing, which has resulted in significant cross-justice sector efficiencies, particularly in the Irish Prison Service. The Criminal Justice Interoperability Project, otherwise known as CJIPT, in facilitating data exchange between Garda Síochána and the Court Service, which has generated savings for both organisations. Court-generated financial transactions valued at €1.8 billion have been transformed and centralised in a shared service centre utilising modern financial and accounting technology, and the development of case management and e-filing projects, including the case management systems for small claims, the Personal Insolvency Service, the Court of Appeal, the Supreme Court. ICT support for the new fines legislation and e-filing projects such as the Debt Claims Online project and the e-licensing projects, which are still underway. The very welcome additional funding in 2016 and again in 2017 for investment in ICT has allowed the Court Service to commence a programme of maintenance and development of our ICT infrastructure, equipment and systems, including a comprehensive cyber security programme, which is critical to maintain the integrity of ICT supports for the courts. An ICT strategy has been put in place to ensure that ICT development in the next 3 years is focused on achieving the maximum benefits for the user, for the court user and the state. The Court Service has also continued its capital building programme with the development of 7 PPP courthouse projects around the country. The first of these projects, the courthouse in Drogheda, was completed in June and was officially opened on Monday of this week. The remaining 6 projects, which will provide state-of-the-art court accommodation facilities, are on target for completion this year. When these projects are completed, there will be only 5 major town venues to be addressed, and we are currently progressing the acquisition of sites where appropriate and necessary to ensure that we are in a position to